All right. Welcome everyone again. We are in Job chapter 41, starting at verse 18. And so we will move on from there. We are discussing Leviathan, and God is basically in the middle here of slapping Job down and saying, Job, you can't touch Leviathan, but I can make him do whatever I want. So, all right, if someone would like to read verses 18 through 21, my little heading is Look at the Terrifying Behavior of Leviathan. Okay.
His sneezes flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning torches, sparks of fire leap forth. Out of his nostrils smoke goes forth, as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame goes forth from his mouth.
All right. So this is an interesting description for those who weren't here last week. We had little scorecards that I made that have some options as to what we think Leviathan might be. So those who brought them back with you, you can continue scoring. The preponderance of the ideas as to what this thing was, Leviathan is sea serpent, dragon, dinosaur, crocodile, whale, or hippo. I'm not sure how anybody else scored it, but I didn't give whale or hippo any scores. But anyhow, you score it the way you want. So this one, his sneezes flash light. By his sneezes a light does shine, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. So I guess you can take a second and score that. His sneezes flash light, whatever you think that might mean. And just pick out your favorite answer, or you can make up your own answer. I don't care. I just wrote down the ones that came out from my studies. So, verse 18, I took some comments from commentators. One commentator said, amphibious animals emerging after having long held their breath underwater respire by violently expelling the breath like one sneezing. In that effort, the eyes, which are usually directed toward the sun, seem to flash fire, or it is expelled breath that in the sun seems to emit light. So basically, that commentator is probably leaning towards the crocodile idea. He holds his breath underwater. He comes up after holding his breath a long time, and he breathes out hard and fast. And so that commentator is essentially saying it's either the sun glistening on the water droplets from the expelled breath, or possibly the sun reflecting on the eyes of the animal and looking like they're aflame. So that's one commentator's thought on it. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. I don't know if you looked at this, but what is the original word for lightning? Is what mine is saying, but was that just light, or was it saying actually lightning?
King James says light. What do the other translations say?
Flashes of light.
Flashes of light, and yours says lightning. Anybody else? Light. I didn't look that particular word up, so
it sounds more likely as flashes of light is what it originally said.
Probably. Probably. So I couldn't, that would make it even a more impressive monster if it was sneezing lightning bolts.
Or electricity type of
Yeah, or electricity. So Anyhow.
There are animals, great and small, that they have stuff going on
Yeah.
in their skulls that produces smoke or even fire or some kind of igniting.
Yeah.
I don't
Well, I know the electric eel for sure produces electricity. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we don't have to limit this creature to something we have seen or
Right.
are currently aware exists or used to exist. The only thing I would say is it's something Job was familiar with. Otherwise,
And God seems pretty excited about it, telling everything that it can do.
yeah. The excitement I think on God's part is this thing is unbelievable and I control it.
And I created it.
Yeah, I created it. I control it.
For its purposes that are unique for itself.
Yeah. So another commentator said, this description of Leviathan, still speaking of verse 18, I believe, this description of Leviathan seems definitely beyond that of a crocodile and leads other commentators to believe that God had in mind much more than a currently known species. Oh, I got jumped ahead of myself. So, so you got one commentator leaning towards explaining what and again, it's poetry. So, he could be speaking of a crocodile sneezing, and then causing water to glisten or like light. I mean, it's poetry, so we can't discard that. But it's also an impressive beast, which other commentators like this seem to think maybe a little more than a crocodile. So let's see, and then the eyelids of the morning, that is in Egyptian hieroglyphics. Egyptian hieroglyphics paint the eyes of the crocodile as the symbol for mourning, because the eyes appear the first thing before the whole body emerges from the deep. So it's kind of like in Egyptian hieroglyphics, mourning is painted with crocodile eyes because that's what you see first. Before you see the whole sun, you see just a little bit. Anyhow, just a little extra. So, I mean, that doesn't change what the Bible says. It's just a kind of a cross-reference to a different culture. And that comes from the same commentator who seemed to think it probably leans towards the crocodile. So verses 19 through 21, out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils go smoke, as out of seething pots or out of a seething pot or cauldron. His breath kindles coals, and a flame goes out of his mouth. All righty, so time to make the scorecard. Here we got fire from his mouth, smoke from his nostrils. Okay, that's pretty much these three verses. There's repeated a couple of those items. So one commentator, this description of Leviathan seems much more like what we would think of as a dragon. And he goes on, curiously, the dragon motif is common across cultures and lands and may point to the actual existence of some creature of this type in prehistory. It may be to this common memory of this fire-breathing reptilian creature that God refers. So that was another commentator's thoughts. And so to this, again, culturally and in our society, we think of fire-breathing dragons as myth and, non-existent. somebody came up with this great idea for a story and, and then they made this thing up. Well, the problem with that is these dragons appear cross cultures, that where they appeared and at the time that they show up in cultural drawings and things like that and cultural descriptions, these cultures really had no interaction, So how does a made up, we talked about last week, I made up a word and said, draw it. And, if none of us here ever saw that made up word, we'd get a variety of different drawings because we'd all make up our own thing.
And we all speak the same language too.
And yeah, good point. And we all speak the same language, even though my made up word is not part of any language. But yeah.
That's two words.
Do I
There's
have
something about something
flopping ladle or
Flopping
something
ladle,
like
yeah.
that? Yeah. So yeah, I can't believe they all remembered the made up word.
I remembered Ben Cup or turned upside cup. Yeah.
All righty, so
Flipping pancakes, that's
yeah, so we got
I said floppy soup ladle.
floppy soup ladles. I mean, so the drawings of my made up word would be really funny to look at, and as long as we didn't copy each other, we'd come up with probably very different things, even though there's a semi-recognizable English word there, ladle or something. But anyhow, so the point is just because we tend to think dragons are mythical, fire-breathing dragons are mythical, does that invalidate that as an option? It's up to you to choose. I mean, I don't think so, because this is an impressive creature, basically to tell Job, look, I can make this thing, I can control this thing, you can't touch it, basically. So,
Also, like, it isn't just this dragon thing that multiple cultures have.
Yeah.
Like, even the story of the worldwide flood, there's multiple cultures that have a worldwide flood story.
Yep. So, and again, this, I mean, a little off Job, but not really, because the book of Job references the creation and the flood different times that we talked about throughout it. So, yeah, a worldwide flood is not a unique story to the Bible. Pretty much.
The Bible is just unique in the fact that it's the right one.
Yeah, the Bible is unique in the fact that it's the right version of the story. But why do all these cultures have stories of a worldwide flood? Well, I don't know. But, I know what the Bible says.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going with, So, I mean, it could be a dragon. And like I think we talked about, again, in the same vein last week briefly, is dinosaurs. I mean, there's cave paintings of dinosaurs. So if we're under the belief that, cavemen were not archaeologists. They were fighting for food, growing food, trying to survive, whatever cavemen were doing, they weren't digging for bones. I think that's probably a safe guess. So not being archaeologists, how are cave paintings showing paintings of dinosaurs if people and dinosaurs didn't coexist at some point? I mean, where they went, how they became extinct, that's a whole nother Bible story, but or another whole Bible study, and probably outside of the Bible you could go with that as well. But suffice it to say, Job was familiar with this thing, whatever it is, and it was impressive, and I would be hard-pressed to think of any logical reason to dismiss things just because modern man says it's not possible. I mean, modern man says it's not possible for someone to rise from the dead. And if that's impossible, our salvation is meaningless. Because without the resurrection, read 1 Corinthians 15, we are of all people most miserable, Paul says. So just because science or so-called science says something's impossible, I wouldn't necessarily buy into it. All righty. The last section, verses 22 through 34, look at the power of Leviathan. Did we not talk about the smoke?
20, yeah. Oh, maybe
Didn't
no.
we talk about that?
20, no.
Okay, out of his nostrils goes smoke as out of a seething pot or cauldron. And then his breath kindles coals and a flame goes out of his mouth. So both kind of similar. Was there
Right.
something else?
A cauldron. Can you, I know what it is, but can you tell me what it is?
It's a big,
Big
pot.
pot.
Big
Big
black
pot.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
witch's
generally.
cauldron.
Yeah, generally
Yeah,
a
big
big
black-
black
yeah.
pot.
Something for
Stirring.
stirring
Yeah.
Yeah,
food or something.
yeah.
Yeah. What is, because my version says, and burning rushes. Is it
Yeah.
just saying it comes out?
Oh,
Or is it?
I
thing?
looked that up. It's the, but did I make notes?
Is it like reeds?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm sorry, for what?
Like a reed, like
Oh,
Like
Oh,
river reeds?
okay.
Coals.
Oh, right.
Burning. Yeah. I looked it
Okay.
up and somehow it didn't make it to my notes.
Okay.
I
Just
do remember
curious.
reading about it, but, so yeah, and I can't go any more into that one. All right, on through 22 through 34, verse 22. In his neck, so this section is look at the power, I call it look at the power of Leviathan, and it could be an image of Satan, imagery of Satan, this Leviathan. And if it is an image of Satan, ain't nothing to God. God whoops up on Leviathan just like he would take care of Satan. You know, Satan's under God's control just like this Leviathan is. So verse 22, speaking of Leviathan, in his neck remains strength, and sorrow is turned into joy before him. So I looked up sorrow or terror. One of the commentators says anxiety or dismay personified. So sorrow or terror is the kind of poetic personification of anxiety, dismay. It's like this is what you do when you see Leviathan. Ah! You know, anxiety, especially if it can run faster than you, and dismay, you know, terror. And then is turned into joy / dances, rather dances, exalts. Wherever he goes, he spreads terror before him. So it's a poetic way of saying his strength. It just exalts before him and says, you know, I'm here, watch out, you know, and so like, let me read it here. And sorrow is turned into joy before him. So terror, anxiety, his presence, he rejoices in his strength.
In himself.
Yeah, he rejoices in himself.
He rejoices in his ability to terrorize.
Yeah, basically, that's what it's
Okay.
kind of
Oh,
saying.
interesting.
He rejoices in his ability to terrorize. Well, certainly could be a little glimpse of Satan there.
Yes.
You know,
What verse was that?
22.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Oh, right there.
Yeah,
It could be anything.
it could be. Yeah, it's poetic. It's
Right.
poetry, but it seems to be that it could be. You know, he's all into himself.
like this verse kind of seems like it could basically apply to pretty much anything. Although I do have a question: do whales have necks?
You score your card any old way you want. Yeah, you score your card any old way you want. Do whales have necks? All righty, that's a question for, I didn't look that up. Suffice it to say that's a question for another
Birds have
time.
necks, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
fish and birds were created on the same day. And
But
the
fish don't get
skeletal of a bird has comparisons to fish even. And
Okay.
I'll only go that far.
Yeah. Feel free to score your card any old way you want. I didn't even think about whales and necks.
Yeah, really.
You know. So anyhow,
Oh, that's so funny.
yeah, haha. Oh, right, I forgot we had a line on the scorecard before that. Oh, and verse 22 spreads terror before him. You can score that on your card as well. They're both from verse 22.
And then verse 23, I have something to say about that.
Okay, read verse 23 and then say what you want to say.
Mine says, there is no soft spot in his skin. It is as hard as iron. And,
Okay.
like you said that crocodiles have a weak spot on their belly.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. That's their
even-
weakest
That's their
spot.
weakest spot.
Even if
Really?
it is
I didn't know
tough,
that.
it would be
That's a
still,
point against the
you
crocodile.
could still
Yeah.
puncture it with a really strong device.
Foals?
I'm sure.
Yeah.
There's a
So-
Leviathan, no.
It's another reference to the impenetrable hide and strong defense, basically. And yeah, you can take that into account for your scorecard if you think, crocodile's underside has a weak spot. I mean, Leviathan doesn't seem to have any, All right. Verse 24. His heart is as firm as a stone, yes, as hard as a piece of the nether millstone. So basically, no sympathy, he's hard-hearted. So again, poetry, but you score hard-heartedness any way you want.
Quick question. In like your version said like as hard as the nether millstone.
Yeah.
Isn't like nether supposed to like mean kind of like hell?
Like
Well, it's the nether
underground,
world.
the
So the millstone has two parts. There's the nether millstone, that's the bottom part that's
okay, that makes
stationary, and then there's the top part of the millstone
I
which
was gonna
gets
say,
turned.
is it like
Yeah.
somehow connected to hell?
I don't think that would be a connection to hell in this case, but it's a similar word. The nether world is
So like
Yeah.
nether means more like underneath,
not. It's under the world,
not like hell.
not necessarily. All right. Yeah. So verse 25. When he raises up himself, the mighty are afraid. By reasons of breakings, they purify themselves.
That makes me think of the sea serpent coming up
Yeah,
when he raises himself up.
yeah, I could see that, the sea serpent coming up. I could also possibly see the crocodile there because when they're going to
'Cause they're a big
move,
one, yeah,
they
sure.
lift up, So, I could see either one of those possibilities. Hard-hearted when he rises up the mighty. Oh yeah, that's on the scorecard. When he rises up the mighty. So I guess on that one, you kind of have to figure out what rising up might mean to each one of these animals.
A whale rises up,
Yeah.
but
He's not
Not
getting
so
my
much.
vote. Yeah, he's
Nah.
not getting my vote. Spy hopping. That's, if you're not familiar, that's what they call it when the whales
spy.
jump straight up out of the
Yes.
water. They call that spy hopping. The whales,
Yeah.
they're
The
actually
whale is
looking
spying around.
Yeah.
just at their above water surroundings. They do call, that's literally, they call it spy hopping.
Not too terrifying unless your boat's really close to it.
Yeah, if your boat's right on top of where the whale wants to come out, it's probably scary, but otherwise, I think whales, unless it was totally blind, would probably not hit your boat. So anyhow, let's see, breakings. All right, so verse 27, iron means nothing to Leviathan. It's like straw, and brass is like rotten wood. Weapons mean nothing to him. Iron equals straw, brass or bronze equals rotten wood. Arrows don't scare him. Sling stones are equal to stubble. Darts or clubs are equal to stubble. And his belly is like sharp stones or potsherds.
So his belly is not soft.
No, not soft.
And
So-
also that kind of find interesting because, like it says, his belly is like sharp pieces of broken pottery, at least in my version.
Yeah,
And he leaves tracks in the mud like a threshing board.
yeah,
Like,
Oh, yes.
like the, like how the wheat is.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
The tribulum.
yeah. So
that,
that's,
like, drags heavy board over
With a bunch of rocks on the bottom.
yeah.
Trying to-
Yeah, so that's exactly what that's saying, is that his belly is like, it's like a threshing.
and another question I have is, does that sound anything like a crocodile's belly?
Yeah.
I'm thinking not, but, you guys do it, you score it the way you want. I mean, like I said, there's no right or wrong answer as to what Leviathan is. You could choose some answers that I might laugh at, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong, It's a whale, yeah, All righty, then. I have no idea, I don't even remember who came up with agreeing with that it was a whale. All right, so verse 31. He makes the deep to boil like a pot. He makes the sea like a pot of ointment.
So does this make it a crocodile after all?
Nope.
Because,
The-
I don't
too
know if
few
it's,
times to say that.
I'm not sure if it's related to the mating season or something, but crocodiles, they are in the water, and then it's kind of it's as if they get the shivers, and it just creates all kinds of bubbles all around them, and it just kind of, all of a sudden, like here it's described as boiling.
But like a lot of bubbles come to surface.
A sea boil. So if this Leviathan does that kind of thing, but on a much greater scale because it's a much bigger animal.
One thing that I think of is it says that he makes the deep to boil. Usually, like alligators and crocodiles are not in like oceans.
Right.
They're in shallow bodies of water,
Right.
not deep bodies of water.
And those bubbles with the crocodile, it's right on the surface of the
Right.
water. It's not in the deep.
Oh,
It says it makes them boil.
Right, and boil is maybe different than bubbles.
Yeah, quite toasty.
I just wondered, is it just my translation, or because my translation, pretty much all the he's are capitalized. Maybe it's just because they're
At the beginning,
of the line.
yeah. Mine are too. Yeah, they're at the,
Can you give an example of a verse?
many of them.
Also, mine is in verse 28. It says arrows don't make him, and that's not
It's
capitalized.
Correct, right.
So I'm pretty sure it's just
Same thing with him, yeah.
I have it. It's always
There's five
it.
of them.
It's never he.
I was just wondering if it was like
Just
just mine, or if it was like
No, it's,
just the translation.
mine are at the beginning and they're capital, yeah.
It's just differences in the translation. It's clearly talking about Leviathan.
So, but but Andrew said they were capitalized.
but it's just because that.
They're at the beginning of
it's
the
the beginning
sentences,
of the
yeah.
sentence. Yeah, okay.
All right. So let's see. Verse 31, my notes. When I was looking around, not too many people address verse 31. Some of them that do verse by verse actually even skip 31. So he makes the deep to boil like a pot. He makes the sea to like a pot of ointment. So my notes, not many address this verse, likely poetic for the turbulence created by the beast's violent movements, which connects well with threshing / spreading of the previous verse.
Why ointment?
Well, we're gonna, I think here, I got notes on that. One of the commentators, when he moves, let's see, oh, this is the guy who thinks it's a crocodile. Pot of ointment, the vessel in which it is mixed, appropriate to the crocodile, which emits a musky smell.
Oh.
I think he's